This is John, broadcasting on 1080 AM. If anyone's still got ears for it, still here, still alive, mostly. I wasn't sure I'd speak again. Not into the mic, not like this. The dust's too thick to carry a voice far, and the wind eats most signals before they even reach the tree line. But the silence, it presses in now, like a second atmosphere. And silence, friends, has a weight. You don't feel it at first, not when you're running, not when you're rationing breath or melting snow to drink. But when the noise of the old world dies, the sirens, the market chatter, the background hum of electricity, something inside you begins to ring with the absence. The last confirmed human transmission I picked up was 82 days ago. Someone named Marin, broadcasting from what used to be Tucson. Her signal was cracked and brief. She said the air was turning sweet, not like flowers, but like rot. I never heard her again. I've held off talking since. Didn't see the point. Didn't think there was one. Until 2 nights ago, I was adjusting the array. Wind had bent the antenna again, and the cold had stripped the copper like teeth. But I heard something. Not static, not storm drift. A signal, deliberate, pulsed, not local. And I think it came from Kepler 442b. So, here I am, back on the air. If there's anyone left to hear this, or anyone else who might be listening from far, far away. This is John, still broadcasting, still surviving. There's not much sky anymore, just a thick ceiling of ash and suspended particulates. Gray by day, orange-black by night. The sun flickers like a dying filament bulb, and when it rains, it stings. 3 days ago, the last of the northern sea ice snapped and drifted south like ghost ships. The ocean's conveyor belt has stopped. No more Gulf Stream, no more regulation. The sea isn't a system anymore. It's a fever. The dust storms have been relentless. Fine-grained silica tearing through the lowlands, coating lungs and solar panels alike. It's not the kind of dust that settles. It stays in the air, grinding. Even breathing filtered cloth burns. I logged a wet bulb event just after midnight last week, 36.9 degrees Celsius with full humidity. That's lethal. You don't sweat in that. You just stop. A young fox wandered into camp that night. Its fur was wet, its eyes cloudy. It didn't last till morning, and the plankton die-offs are confirmed now, which means the oxygen curve is collapsing. We've got maybe 7 years before the air gets too thin for mistakes. Maybe less. This planet, she's not angry. She's indifferent. And we were never her concern. I say all this not to frighten you. If you're still listening, you already know. I say it to anchor the timeline, to remember how far we've sunk, and to mark the moment something else called back. The last time I sat beneath the dome, it was winter, the kind of winter we used to call ordinary. Snow on the ridgeline, frost on the dome glass, power in the walls. I'd made coffee, real beans, not powder. I'd just realigned the azimuth gears. I remember being proud of that, proud of maintenance. Funny what we used to celebrate. That night, I aimed the array toward Kepler. Not for research, not for data, just out of habit. A reflex, looking outward when everything inward was starting to break. The stars didn't blink. They don't anymore. The atmosphere's too thick now for them to shimmer. They just hang there, cold, silent, watching. I remember the hum of the motors, the gentle glide of the dish above my head. I remember thinking, even if no one's up there, at least the listening still matters. I never told anyone, but I left the feed open, kept it pointed that way, Long after I stopped running the software, maybe I was hoping something might eventually answer, or maybe I just couldn't bear to turn it off. And now, here we are. 2 nights ago, that same channel, the one I tuned out of instinct, not purpose, came alive. A low pulse, repeating every 91 seconds, decay-coded modulation, intelligent formatting, not weather, not cosmic noise. Something spoke, or tried to, and I think it remembered I was still here. The observatory that caught it, the Coldwater Deep Sky Array, hasn't been online in years. Power grid went down during the blackout cascades. Most thought it burned, but the backup relay still had partial juice, probably drawing from geothermal trickle. That's where the signal hit. Low angle, high spread, directionally clean. Kepler 442b is 1,206 light years from here. The signal shouldn't be possible, but it came, threaded through ionospheric bounce, routed by systems no one should still be running. It wasn't a voice, not exactly, but it was shaped like one, structured, curated, repeating with just enough error to feel human. Or maybe once human. No identifiers, no origin tag, just a simple pulse at the edge of plausibility. And now I can't stop thinking, did we send something first? There's a thought I can't shake. Maybe we're not receiving. Maybe we're only hearing ourselves. Maybe we launched a cry into the dark centuries ago. A whisper of desperation carried by Voyager, by SETI, by school children's signals and vanity probes, and now it's just rebounding, coming back to find there's nothing left to answer. If so, this signal isn't help. It's memory. Time is not a line out here. It loops, it folds. The stars don't speak in sentences, they speak in recursion, in return. And maybe that's all we've ever heard. Ourselves, reflected across centuries, echoing into a silence we never truly left. Still, I'll keep listening, because even if it's only us, it means someone was here. And that might be enough. We used to say things like bad weather, thunderstorms, heat waves, cold snaps, as if the planet were still playing by rules we understood. Cycles, seasons, anomalies. But the rules changed, and then they vanished. I remember the first time the term wet bulb temperature entered public vocabulary. It sounded technical, harmless, like something you'd hear in a greenhouse. But it meant death, quiet, efficient death. Your body's sweat can't evaporate. You stop cooling. Then you stop thinking. Then stop being. It started in the places we once called crowded. Delhi, Karachi, Jakarta. Cities pressed under heat domes so dense, birds dropped mid-flight, and children forgot the taste of water. I tracked the curve here on my old instruments. Watched it tilt, then leap. I logged 37.5 degrees Celsius wet bulb last year, just after dawn. That's beyond survivable. That's the atmosphere telling us we are no longer invited. Funny how long it took us to believe it. We adapted for a while. Cooling shelters, underground farming, breathable cloth, temporary solutions for a terminal diagnosis. Now I don't call it weather, I call it mood, the planet's mood, and she's withdrawn. Cold when she wants to be, burning when she must, silent, always. Still, I document it, chart the temperatures, count the hours between storms, pretend someone else is recording too, pretend it matters. Because even when there's no one left to warn, I still whisper the warnings. This is John, still broadcasting, still surviving. You may not have heard of the AMOC, the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, but you felt it. It's the ocean's pulse, the system that used to ferry warm water from the tropics up to the North Atlantic, where it cooled, sank, and kept the climate breathing. It's gone now. I watched the models blink red years ago. Then the real data caught up and surpassed them. No more overturning, no more conveyor, just still water, layering like sediment. No oxygen exchange, no renewal. When the AMOC died, so did the patterns. Rain stopped arriving where it used to. Warmth lingered in places it never should have touched. Storms bloomed from calm seas like bruises. They said it would take centuries to break. It took decades. And with it went the coral, the fisheries, the coastal cities that depended on the tide's timing. I remember standing on a ruined jetty once, watching jellyfish pile up like old paper, the sea no longer feeding or cleaning itself, just floating in place. It's hard to explain what it feels like when the planet's breath stops. It's not loud, not sudden, just a settling, a stillness, like a room after someone has left it and forgotten to return. That's what we're in now, a house left behind, a system holding its breath forever. Still, I breathe. Still, I broadcast. I have a list. I don't read from it often. It's burned into me. Lagos, Manila, Cairo, Bangkok, São Paulo, Dhaka, not bombed, not conquered, just undone. The equator became a death line. Every city within reach of its new perimeter suffered what the reports first called cascading collapses, then stopped reporting altogether. Food ran dry first, then water, then patience. There were no mass evacuations, no humanitarian corridors, just a slow, irreversible spill of bodies outward, into deserts, mountains, rivers that had long since boiled down to sand. I once tried to help coordinate a relay shelter near New Guinea. We had a comm loop for a week, maybe less. The woman on the other end, her name was Nia, said she had 200 refugees and 10 liters of drinking water. The last thing she said was, "I can't open the doors anymore. They don't knock. They just press." I never heard her again. We always assumed the end would come with flames, but it came as heat. Heat that did not leave. That sat in concrete and made lungs seize and crops vanish. We called these places developing once, as if they were incomplete, as if we had something they didn't. But when the heat arrived, they bore it longer than we did, until they couldn't. And then they joined the silence. My sister's name was Elise. She was a systems tech, kept water pumps and microgrids alive in the years we still believed in decentralization. We were part of the same relay network, different zones. I used to hear her on the Western Band every third day. She had a voice like amber, low, calm, always finishing with, "I'll catch the dawn." The last night I heard her, she was speaking slower than usual. Heat had climbed to 44 degrees where she was. No wind, just still air and blinking red lights on her system board. She said, "The inverter's failing. Batteries pulsing. It's like it knows." Then there was a long pause, longer than the carrier signal could justify. I almost thought she'd dropped out, but she came back, said only, "I dreamed of Mom's garden. It was raining." That was it. Then static. I tried everything. Secondary channels, emergency override codes. No response. I never heard her again. I imagine her hand resting on the switch, her eyes on the blinking board, the silence in her voice louder than the storm building outside. I know she's gone. But sometimes, when the wind turns just right, I think I still hear her frequency. And sometimes, I answer. The new signal came yesterday. Not a pulse, not drift, but rhythm. Morse. I hadn't heard it in years. Had to dust off the old translator. The dots and dashes came slow, repeating every 3 minutes. I wrote it out. Triple checked. It spelled a single word. Home. Not coordinates, not a call sign, just that. I don't know if it's a joke, a glitch, some ancient broadcast returning like a ghost with only one word left. Or maybe it's meant for us. Or worse, from us. Maybe somewhere long ago we whispered that word into the dark, hoping someone would find it. And now it comes back to remind us what we've lost. Or what we still might find. Still here. Still decoding. Still listening. This is John. Still broadcasting. We left before dawn. Not because the sun rises like it used to, it doesn't. But because even now, even in ruin, some part of me respects the rhythm of things. Jules insisted we go on foot. The battery sled had half a charge, but he didn't trust the terrain. The road's cracked, he said, but our boots still know how to follow it. Coldwater was north. What used to be a short haul. Now it's days of silence and ash. The snow here isn't white. It's tinted with copper dust and soot. It tastes of rust. We carried little. A pack of filters, a solar canteen, one folding dish. I logged signal strength every hour. It stayed steady. Not stronger. Not weaker. Just, waiting. Jules doesn't talk much anymore. His breath wheezes through that old patch on his mask. He's built like a remnant, all joints and wire and memory. But when we passed the old fire tower, he whispered something. Just one line. Do you think they'll answer again? I said nothing, because I don't know if it's them out there, or us, folded back. Coldwater appeared 2 days later, rising from the permafrost like a sunken ribcage, bent struts, antennas curved like wilted stems. The dish was half collapsed, but the core relay blinked faintly beneath it. It was still breathing, and I think it heard something we weren't meant to remember. The entrance was sealed by time. Ice had claimed the door hinges, warped the hatch frame. Jules used a heat coil to melt through. The steel let go with a sound like a sigh. Inside, the air was still, dry, preserved by cold and isolation. Paper curled but legible, consoles cracked but recognizable. I touched one of the monitors. Its screen flickered, then settled into static. The Coldwater Deep Sky Array was one of the last listening posts before the network fell. It was meant to catch deep time transmissions, pulsars, radiation curves, the size of dead stars, but something else found its way here. Jules began checking the logs. The command line still ran, barely, redundant loops spinning through memory files. Half of the hardware was unsalvageable, but the heart of the array still beat, weak, fractured, but functional. We set up a power bridge from our pack, fed it slow current. It hummed like an old throat clearing. Then we saw it. Log entry 442b, tagged but never filed. A single line of metadata. No origin stamp, no sender. Only the label EM442b. Jules just stared at it. His voice cracked. This system hasn't accepted inbound transmissions in over 6 years. And yet, it had. We sat by the array that night, wind curling through the vents, the cold crawling down to the bone. Jules talked more than usual, which means he spoke at all. He told me about the flare, the one that knocked out the last of the satellite grid. He'd seen it, felt it, said it was like watching the stars unplug themselves one by one. It wasn't immediate. Nothing ever is. The surge built, climbed past tolerances, and cascaded through the orbital rings. One by one, satellites blinked out. First communications, then geo, then even the old weather arrays that barely functioned. Earth went blind. The flare came from a sunspot no one had predicted, or maybe we had. Maybe someone had. But the warnings drowned in the noise. He said the night after the blackout was the quietest he'd ever heard the planet. No planes, no traffic, no grid hum, just the sound of wind moving without permission. I asked him what he missed most. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, the latency, the delay between ask and answer. It meant someone was there to respond. Now, when we speak, the delay is eternal. Unless something did respond. The backup archive room was cracked open by frost. Cabinets leaned at angles, and insulation flaked like sunburned skin, but tucked in a corner, in a box marked obsolete. We found it. A magnetic reel, labeled by hand, EM442b. The label was faded, black marker bleeding into paper, but it was there. Jules hesitated. He looked afraid, like he recognized the handwriting. I rigged a playback spindle from spare wiring. It took an hour to splice the output into the array's surviving converter. When it played, it came slow, halting, half deteriorated. But there it was, not the Kepler signal, ours, a transmission sent outward by someone. Long ago, Jules muttered, we never authorized outbound. He pulled up the logs. There was no record, no timestamp, no operator ID, but the waveform matched our own coding protocols, Ik bin Kirkbierstandard, which means it originated here. Not now, not even recently, but before the blackout cascades, before the famine years, before we stopped calling it a planet and started calling it wreckage. We sent something, and now it may have come back. The reel keeps playing, looped in static and half-buried patterns. Jules tries to clean it, remove the artifacts, but I'm not sure they're artifacts. I think they're answers, embedded in our own voice, faint harmonics layered beneath the carrier wave. It's like listening to a memory that never belonged to you. If we sent this, who decided to? Governments were fractured by then. Communication was already failing. And yet someone had the foresight or desperation to send a message out toward Kepler 442b. Why? Was it hope? Was it warning? Was it surrender? Or something darker, a request? There's a tone in the signal I can't unhear. Not a voice, not a language, just an urgency, as if someone wanted to be found, or needed us to remember. But no one recalls launching it. Jules swears it wasn't part of any program he ever ran, and he ran many. So either we forgot, or we were made to forget. The reel ends on a silence so thick it hums, and I can't shake the feeling that whatever we sent wasn't ours to send, and whatever's answering, it remembers more than we do. This is John, still listening, still decoding. It started with static, not the harsh kind, but soft, like snowfall through wires. I let the reel spin longer this time. No filters, no scrubs, just raw signal, uncut. Then I heard it. Not a message, not in the conventional sense, but a sound tucked between the noise floor and the waveform's edge. A hum. Faint, almost rhythmic. 3 notes, then pause. Again, then again. Fragile, like breath, before a lullaby. I leaned in, turned the dial, boosted gain, and there it was, a child's voice. Not speaking, not crying, just humming. That soft, uncertain sound children make when the world hasn't yet told them to stop. The kind of hum that fills silence because silence is too big to bear. It wasn't recent, couldn't be. There's no child here, no children for miles. The last time I heard a voice like that, I was warming canned soup over a fire barrel. Year 6, midwinter. She was wrapped in 2 coats and still shivering. The voice in the static, it sounded like her, but it couldn't be. And yet, I haven't stopped the tape since. I keep listening, looping, as if, by repetition, I can decode something deeper. Maybe I've lost my edge. Maybe grief is finally turning knobs I shouldn't touch. But that hum, that impossible little melody in the dead air of space, it's there. And whoever or whatever sent it knew I'd be listening. I haven't spoken her name on air before. Didn't see the point. Didn't trust myself not to fracture in the middle of it. But I will now. Her name was Imani. She arrived during the ash storms of year 6. No parents, no pack. Just 2 jackets stitched together and eyes that had seen too much for their size. She couldn't have been older than 8, maybe 9. She didn't speak at first, just sat near the heater coil and watched the dials on my transmitter blink. For hours. Like they were telling her stories I couldn't hear. I shared my last vitamin tab with her, and the cleanest blanket. She stayed 6 days. On the 7th, the fever came. We didn't have meds by then, just boiled water and old comfort. I kept the fire steady and read her pieces of books she wouldn't have known. She smiled once, maybe twice. On the last night she hummed. 3 notes, the same ones in the static. I never buried her. Ground was too frozen. I wrapped her in tarp and left her by the cliff where the trees hadn't yet fallen. I promised myself I wouldn't let grief shape my hallucinations. But I know what I heard. And if that signal truly carries her voice, then either the universe has a memory longer than time, or something out there is reaching into mine. Kepler 442b is 1,206 light years away. That means if they're hearing us now, they're hearing the 9th century, before the radio, before telescopes, before electricity, before vaccines and carbon and engines and code, before we knew the shape of ourselves, back when we were still breaking each other with stone and silence. It takes that long for light to travel, for signals to leave our wounded sphere and cross the dark. So if something is responding now, it had to begin listening long before we even knew to whisper. And that means whatever sent this has waited, not hours, not centuries, but epochs. It's a strange feeling, realizing the messages we sent, the music, the greetings, the digital beacons will arrive long after we've stopped singing. Maybe they already have. Maybe someone heard Bach before they knew bullets, heard Voyager before they saw violence, and now perhaps they've answered. But not with urgency, with something else, something slower, intimate, familiar, a hum, a memory, a mirror. Light doesn't just carry information. It carries who we were, not who we are. So maybe they don't know the world burned. Maybe they only know the world sang. And maybe that's all they're trying to give back. I don't believe in ghosts, but I do believe in echoes. I've started to wonder, what if this voice in the signal isn't them at all? What if it's us? Not who we are, but who we might have become, had the path twisted just a little differently. Maybe somewhere far beyond gravity and frost and war we endure, not in flesh, but in sound, in thought, in pulse. Maybe the signal is not from the past, or even from the stars. Maybe it's the shape of the future, humming back a lullaby to remind us that we were once children too. Maybe Imani's voice traveled farther than I ever could. Maybe her hum found a satellite to ride, a frequency to cling to. Maybe kindness has a longer wavelength than despair. Or maybe the universe is just showing us a version of ourselves it still hopes we might remember. Even now, even after all the collapse, something listens. I used to think silence was emptiness, but now I know better. Silence is waiting. A pause between verses. A breath before answer. Not all echoes are innocent. Some are lures, some are warnings, but some are invitations. And if this signal is an invitation, we've already opened it. A whisper's made its way across the dead frequencies. It crackles in old relay nodes and drips between bursts of static like condensation. They say there's green again. Up north, beyond the fractured pipeline corridors, past the frost-bitten oil fields and long dead grain elevators, a verdant zone, a place called the Orchard. The word reached me 2 nights ago, stitched through a broken military band out of Calgary. Garbled at first, but steady in rhythm. A geothermal hub that never failed. A greenhouse sealed underground. They say they're growing. Not just crops, color, carrots, beets. Something that smells like mint. It's absurd. It's beautiful. And part of me believes it, if only because I need to. This planet doesn't grow much anymore. The soil here is gray. The air tastes of metal. Even the moss has gone brittle with radiation. Dust. But hope grows in stranger places than plants. We learned that during the Salt Lake collapse, during the Oregon fires, during every slow death that made us lean forward just to hear if someone might still be breathing. So now I listen again, for a voice, a location, a name. Even lies sound better than silence these days. And lies, sometimes, are just truths trying to find a pulse. Last night, I caught fragments. This is Orchard Unit 3. Shelters active. Humidity chamber stable. Climate rating 7.5. It faded in and out, buried beneath static and what sounded like recycled jazz. Jules would have said it was a loop, a corrupted automation. But Jules isn't here anymore, and sometimes the heart hears what the mind rejects. They spoke in calm voices, measured, like people who had seen too much panic to ever use it again. One voice said, "We still see daily. Let that be known." That line stuck with me. Let that be known. They weren't broadcasting for help. They weren't pleading. They were reporting. As if the act of growing something, anything, in this lifeless crust still needed to be witnessed. And if it's real, if there's one place left where breath doesn't fog with poison, where roots still dig downward without burning, then maybe the war between collapse and memory hasn't ended. Maybe it's just moved underground. I want to believe in the orchard. I do. But the scientist in me, the husk of who I used to be, weighs hope against data. Acid rain still falls in the mid-northern latitudes. Sulfuric mix mostly. Burned out my last wind panel in 2 days. Radiation levels are spiking again, especially near fault zones. The poles flipped 4 years back, and the ozone never recovered. UV's climbing. And then there's the heat blooms. Geothermal spots are unpredictable now. Some overpressurize. Some collapse. The tectonics are still angry. The idea of a functioning agricultural zone in Alberta defies every model I ever ran. Even underground, even shielded. The pH alone would kill most roots. And yet, they said mint. You don't hallucinate mint. You remember it. It's tied to memory, to childhood. So I try not to run the math. I try not to count the reasons why they shouldn't exist. I just tune in and wait, because hope is not a strategy, but sometimes it's the only fuel left. And a rumor, even if it's wrong, still carries the shape of belief. So I let it play, again and again. Let it be known. I tried to reach them. Every frequency, every modulation, I could cobble together from the old HAM rig. Nothing but the sound of the void breathing. The orchard didn't answer, but someone or something did. Not a voice, not a tone. A system, automated, cold. It said, incoming from EM 442b. Stand by for next transmission. No location, no timestamp, no confirmation. Just those words. Repeated twice, then silence. I stared at the readout for a long time after. Not because I didn't understand, but because I did. It's syncing. The Kepler signal, the original transmission. It's matching rhythm now, not to the radio band, not to orbit, but to Earth's geomagnetic resonance. I measured it, twice. A slow, tremoring pattern, barely perceptible, but real. Like a second heartbeat beneath the crust. Not natural, not coincidence. Something is aligning itself with what remains of our planet's electromagnetic signature. Tuning in, like a physician, listening to a dying lung. And the scariest part? It's perfectly timed. As if it's not trying to speak. As if it's trying to harmonize. Or worse, respond. This is John, still measuring, still waiting, still broadcasting. Not all heroes were soldiers. Not all saviors wore symbols. In the end, it was the nameless who kept the lights on, the substation tech in Tulsa who bypassed 10 kilometers of scorched grid with copper wire and chewing gum, the mechanic in Tangier who turned a rusted windmill into a filtration pump, the student in Lima who wrote the emergency broadcast algorithm in his basement just before the collapse took his lungs, the woman in Ulaanbaatar who powered an orphan shelter with bicycle dynamos. They weren't documented, they weren't decorated, but they bought us time. Time to gather, time to adapt, time to remember. Their names aren't in any archive. Most of them never made it beyond the third year, but their fingerprints are still on the knobs I turn, the code I use, the frequencies I scan. This broadcast, the one you're hearing now, runs on circuits rewired by a man named Hector who died in year 8 of kidney rot. He left behind a toolkit and a solar mat wrapped in old maps. He wrote one thing in permanent marker on the mat's edge. You don't quit until the signal dies. So I haven't. This is for them, the ones who stayed behind to hold a light for the rest of us. The forgotten hands that lit the dark, still broadcasting, still surviving. Her name was Lydia. I never met her, but I found her journal, tucked in a waterproof case near the ruins of a field hospital. Ink faded, corners curled, but legible. She was a nurse before the fever, trained in Manila, stationed near Portland. She called it the silence, not because it caused muteness, but because it spread without sound. No coughing, no sneezing, no fever screams, just quiet. First in the lungs, then in the heart, then in the world. She documented everything, hour by hour, breaths per minute, blood oxygen, ECG drift. But alongside the data were poems. Notes to a daughter lost in the chaos. Sketches of faces she couldn't save. Recipes, herbal remedies, lullabies. The silent fever wasn't airborne. It wasn't even alive by viral standards. It was environmental. A collapse of immune response triggered by air pollutants, nanoparticulates, decayed pharmacology. The body stopped fighting. Lydia never blamed anyone, not the governments, not the looters, not even herself. She just kept recording until the end. Her final entry was just 7 words, written like a prayer. I hope someone reads this and cares. I did, Lydia, and I do. You didn't name the silence because you feared it. You named it so we wouldn't forget how it came, gently, like dusk, and took everything without raising its voice. Your words outlived your world. They made it here, and now they live again in mine. I've copied some of Lydia's entries onto thermal tape, the kind that resists decay, even in soot. I plan to leave them along the southern rail track, one every 10 miles, not as warnings, as artifacts. If anyone finds them, a scavenger, a child, someone who still believes maps matter, they'll know someone tried to comfort the dying, that someone remembered names. That care did not expire when supply chains did. Her words aren't large, they don't seek grandeur, but they carry weight, like ash caught in a gust, brief, slow, inevitable. I washed his hands even after death, she wrote, because clean hands are a kind goodbye. There's still something holy in that. I decoded another sliver of the Kepler signal today. Not language, not music, numbers, coordinates. They weren't celestial. I cross-checked against known star maps. Nothing aligned. But when I layered them on a terrestrial overlay, they landed. Earth, northwest quadrant, high desert shelf, 46 degrees north, 123 west, somewhere in the Cascadia Range, deep, beneath the volcanic veins. I felt a pressure behind my eyes when I read them, like the map had teeth. We've always looked up for answers, but this points down, as if whatever sent this message, whatever's mirroring or responding, wants us not to leave, but to dig. It's the first time I've felt the earth was inviting me inward instead of pushing me away. What's down there? A vault? A ruin? A warning? Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's where we buried something long ago and forgot to mark the grave. The Cascadia Fault is unstable. Always has been. But now, it's alive. I don't mean seismic in the usual sense. I mean timed, patterned, a low-frequency pulse, measurable, rhythmic, and it matches the Kepler return cadence. The ground, somehow, is answering. I laid out a copper coil near the old relay mast, traced the signal. It isn't just echo, it's feed, two-way, as if something deep beneath, something locked in strata and pressure and memory, is listening too. Not human, not necessarily hostile, but not accidental. Maybe this isn't about stars anymore. Maybe this is about us. What we left. What we covered. What we swore we'd never dig up again. And now the earth itself is asking, are you ready to remember? This is John. Still decoding. Still surviving. Still listening. Jules is gone. He went quiet in the middle of a calibration. Slumped over a voltmeter like someone leaning into prayer. I checked the ration log afterward. He'd been underfeeding himself for weeks, giving me his share, mostly, hiding it, pretending he wasn't. Said he wasn't hungry, that he ate when I wasn't looking. We tell lies like that when we want someone else to live longer than we will. I wrapped him in a heat sheet and laid him near the edge of the old solar array. Didn't have the strength to dig. Ground's too cold anyway. I didn't say words over him. He never would have wanted that. But I did power cycle the relay. Sent one pulse out into the dark. Not a farewell. Just a blink. A flicker. A nod. Because Jules didn't die of famine, not really. He died of belief. He believed I might still find something, still hear something, that the signal, that hum, meant something. And now I wonder if survival's even noble, or just a kind of mechanical inertia. Staying alive isn't the same as being alive, but I'm still here, and the transmitter's still warm. There was a note in his pocket, folded, wrinkled, soaked with iron. Just 4 words. Written in that slanted scrawl of his. The signal knew. Tell him. No signature, no date, just the words. I read them again and again. It wasn't grief that made my fingers tremble. It was implication. That he knew something I didn't. That maybe he'd known for a long time and hadn't said a word because he thought I couldn't handle it. The signal wasn't just noise, wasn't just echo, it was aware. And now that he's gone, I'm left with a truth I didn't ask for and a transmission I don't understand. But if the signal knew, really knew, then there's something it wants, or worse, something it's waiting for. I remembered something he said once back in year 9. We were rewiring the secondary dish mount. He mentioned a ghost server buried near the old SETI outpost, one that wasn't listed on any surviving map. He called it the backbone node, said it was where the real listening happened, where the raw feeds were stored, untouched by public filters or government rewrites. I thought it was a story, a memory twisted by time, but I went looking, North Ridge, past the canyon break, ground's unstable, frost heaves in every direction, found the hatch by luck, or maybe it found me, buried beneath moss and rust, held closed with 6 deadbolts and a failed biometric lock. Took me 6 hours to pry it open. Inside was cold, bone cold, shelves of server stacks, drives half-eaten by moisture, but one terminal still blinked, diamond soins flickering, but alive. And when I powered the backup cell, the logs came online. Not just logs, transmissions, from Kepler 442b, time-stamped before the collapse, before the famines, meaning the signal isn't recent, meaning we knew, meaning someone was already listening and recording long before the rest of us ever heard a thing. The drives are old, the data's slow to unpack, but I'll keep reading, because if this terminal has been waiting all this time, then so has something else. The deeper I dig through the logs, the clearer it becomes. We sent something, a transmission, intentional, structured, high gain, narrow band, directed straight at Kepler 442b, encoded with biological markers, atmospheric data, linguistic constructs, emotional resonance patterns. We didn't just say hello, we introduced ourselves. And now something, whatever lives or doesn't live out there, has responded. Not immediately, not loudly, but precisely. Our signal was a question. And now we have an answer. Only no one remembers asking, and no one is prepared for what might be answering back. Maybe we didn't fall by accident. Maybe the collapse wasn't just climate, greed, or biology. Maybe we opened a door, lit a beacon in a dark forest and waited, like fools, to see what came toward the fire. Maybe the signal wasn't a scream or a whisper, but a key, and maybe we turned it. I don't say this to scare you. I say it because I'm scared. And I think we need to ask ourselves, not what we said, but who or what we said it to. It came through just after midnight. The Kepler signal. Same band, same pulse spacing. But this time there were words. And not just any words. Mine. My voice. Warped, weathered, like it had been dragged through vacuum and wire, scraped along metal, bounced off something that didn't understand what a voice is. But it was me. Something I said once, something I don't remember saying. The phrase was, keep the relay warm, even if no one's left to answer. I said that years ago, I think, to Jules, during a freeze when we nearly lost the transmitter, but I never recorded it, never broadcast it. So how? How does something light years away, something that shouldn't even exist, in terms we understand, play back a fragment of me I never sent? Unless it was sent. Somehow. Without my knowing. Unless there's a piece of me out there I forgot I gave away. Or worse, a version of me that spoke first. And now I'm the echo. I've been pacing the loop for hours. Not physically, mentally, trying to make it fit. Maybe it's mimicry, artificial intelligence pattern recognition, something embedded in the transmission to make me think it's mine. That would be the clean explanation, the safe one. But there's structure here, human irregularity, breath, hesitation, the way my voice dips when I talk about loss, the slight catch I get when I say relay. A machine doesn't copy grief. Not like that. Then I thought, feedback loop? A latency echo from some ancient relay, bouncing my own signal back? But the path's too clean, too focused, no scattering, no drift. And the timestamp embedded in the carrier, it predates the first Kepler pulse I ever heard, which leaves one option, recursion. That's the theory that frightens me most. That time doesn't just move forward, it folds. That events reflect, repeat. That messages don't travel from the past or to the future, but circulate in a loop until someone is willing to hear them again. And maybe I'm not hearing a reply. Maybe I'm hearing the start. Maybe this is the beginning of the message, and I was always meant to receive it. In 5th grade, before the ocean swallowed the first coastlines, before we knew what a wet bulb death was, I participated in a school project. We each recorded a message to send to space. Just kids, mostly laughing, counting stars, asking questions no one would ever answer. My message was awkward. I remember that. I didn't know what to say. I didn't understand what a light year was, let alone the silence it implied. So I just talked. I said, if you're out there, we're not always like this. We hurt each other, but we're trying. Please remember that. Please remember the trying. I remember writing it on paper first, practicing it. They told us the signal was uploaded to a satellite array in Nevada, that it would broadcast out into the dark forever. But the program was scrapped 6 months later. Solar flare damage, budget collapse, priorities shifting. The files were lost. We thought they were lost. What if they weren't? What if something out there archived that voice? What if the voice I heard wasn't just mine from now, but mine from then? A child's appeal launched across decades in space, only to return in the twilight of a dying world, saying, in its own broken way, I never forgot. Maybe the universe remembers us better than we remember ourselves. The final piece of the Kepler signal decoded today. Not a voice, not music. Coordinates, but not terrestrial. They don't align with any Earth-based system. Not latitude, not longitude. The spacing suggests spatial depth, vector coordinates, starbound. Triangulated through deep space parallax. If I'm right, and I'm fairly certain I am, they point away from Kepler 442b, not toward it, toward somewhere else, somewhere beyond. I checked old SETI logs, checked abandoned telescope arrays. Nothing correlates. This isn't a known system. This is new. Or perhaps just forgotten. I don't know what's there. But someone wants us to go. Or someone wants us to know they already did. What if this isn't a reply? What if all we're hearing is the long rebound of ourselves, our hopes, our voices, our better questions, sent outward in innocence and now returning in decay? Not because someone hurt us, but because no one ever did. And still, the signal plays. I've been staring at the coordinates for hours, not plotting them, not preparing, just staring. They point off-world, beyond Kepler, beyond anything mapped. If they're real, if there's something there, it may be a doorway, a threshold, maybe escape, maybe exile, maybe something else. But here's the question I keep circling back to over and over. If there's a way out, should anyone go? After everything we did to this place, should anyone be granted another sky? Who gets to restart the story? And who gets left behind with the closing credits still burning into the soil? I don't have a list. No final archive of the best of us. The best of us are ash now. And the worst? They were just hungry, or scared, or too slow to outrun the world's collapse. There are no saints left, just those still breathing. And I'm not even sure that qualifies as living anymore. Still, I wonder, if I were to send these coordinates, if I cast them into the frequencies like a flare, would it matter? Would it reach someone who remembers how to hope without breaking the thing they land on? Or would it just start the ruin all over again? The mind is a cruel companion in silence. It loops, reruns, exaggerates, fades, then replays again. Since finding the destination embedded in the Kepler echo, I haven't spoken much, not even into this mic, because knowing, it separates. You're no longer part of the mystery. You're its witness. And a witness doesn't always get to be believed. There's no one here to confirm what I found. No Jules, no Imani, no voice on the other end, just logs, coordinates, a voice that sounded like mine from before I was old enough to mourn. I question whether this truth is mercy or poison, because carrying a truth no one else can shoulder is like walking with a sealed letter that will never be read. And yet, I keep tuning the array. I keep whispering into static, because maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this isn't the end. Maybe someone will hear, and maybe knowing is only lonely until someone replies. The solar cell flared back to life this morning. I don't know how. Could have been a wind shift clearing the panel, or a lucky break in the ash. Doesn't matter. What matters is that the lights blinked, the server thrummed, and the transmitter's core warmed just enough for one more burst. So I've packed everything I know into the loop. The coordinates, the logs, the journal entries, the signal pattern, the names, Jules, Lydia, Imani, Marin. I've included fragments of the sky as it used to sound, old field recordings, bird song, thunder before it became weaponized, even laughter, mine, strained, broken, but real. And my voice, layered over it all, steady but tired. A voice that says, we were not a perfect species, but we tried. We carved stories into silence. We filtered water with threadbare hope. We died holding hands. I've set it to cycle on a narrow band burst every 12 hours, directed toward the last known vector. I don't know if it will reach, but it will leave. And that's all a broadcast is in the end. A hand extended in the dark. This is John, still broadcasting, one more time. If someone's out there, not watching but listening, know this, we weren't just dying. We were waiting for the heat to pass, for the oceans to calm, for forgiveness we never earned, for a reply. We wrote poems in dust, folded kindness into radio waves, named our children after stars we never reached. We built machines not to conquer, but to remember. And I remember, even now, especially now. I send this not in hope, but in memory, because somewhere, beneath all the collapse, we meant well, even when we failed. And if someone finds this frequency, if it touches the right wire or lands in the right hands, let them know we were here and we tried. The signal cut out an hour ago. I thought that was it, but something's changed. The ground beneath me is humming, not metaphorically, literally. I tuned the seismometer, what's left of it, and there it was, a structured pulse, not from Kepler, from below, deep crustal frequency, rhythmic, syncopated, as if Earth itself is responding, or warning, or remembering. We always look to the stars for meaning. But maybe it was here the whole time, buried, coiled in fault lines and forgotten dreams, not alien, not divine, just something old and awake. This is John, still here, still hearing, and the planet, finally, is speaking back. The walls are weeping again. There's a seam behind the generator panel that started dripping yesterday. Water from the roof, probably. Melt from permafrost above, pushing through the old seals. It's a slow leak, but constant. I've set out every container I have. Metal bowls, plastic lids, the basin from the filtration tank. They catch the drips with a hollow rhythm like breath or memory. The air here smells of rust and mildew and something faintly sweet, like old wiring gone soft. I sleep in half-hour segments now. Anything longer and the dreams get too real. Too stitched with faces I can't speak to anymore. Jules, Imani, Lydia. The air is heavy, thinner by the day, not from carbon or rot, but from time. You can feel it. How time weighs more when there's no one else to carry it with you. I keep the transmitter warm. The signal looped, my voice steady, though my hands shake when the wind hits the door frame too hard. The world has shrunk to this place. One room, one frequency, one fading pulse in the dark, and yet this bunker, cracked and breathing in leaks, still holds. Not because it's strong, but because I'm still inside it, still choosing to transmit, still choosing to be heard. This is John, still surviving, still listening. We thought the stars were the goal, back when we had rockets and orbital stations and banners that said, "Next stop, Mars." We told ourselves space was the future, that if the Earth ever failed, we'd leave, start over, reboot. But we didn't fail the Earth. We broke it. And now, here I am, in a leaking hole in the crust, and I finally understand what Kepler meant. It wasn't a warning. It was a mirror, a frequency that played our hopes back to us with distortion, a ghost signal shaped like our ambition, not because it came from the stars, but because it rose from our own collapse. We keep chasing things in loops. That's what recursion is, a copy of a copy, until the original meaning erodes and only the shape remains. Kepler was never a reply. It was never a call to leave. It was an echo of our own hunger, and maybe that's the real tragedy. Not that we didn't make it to the stars, but that we misunderstood the message. We weren't meant to run. We were meant to see. And maybe that's what the signal was trying to say, that when you stop running long enough, you start to understand where you really are. We always thought survival meant motion, breath, food, water, resistance. But what if survival isn't about enduring the body? What if it's about preserving the truth? What if survival is memory? The act of remembering what the world was, even as it forgets itself. I've kept logs, recordings, voice loops layered with names, dates, songs I barely remember how to hum. Somewhere in the data, Lydia's words are stored. Imani's hum. Jules's hands scribbling numbers in Quiet code. If this place fails, if I fail, then at least those pieces might float, might drift far enough into someone else's future to spark a thought, a question, to whisper, they tried, not to escape, but to witness. Because maybe that's what it means to remain human, not to live forever, not even to outlast the fire, but to leave a signal inside the ash, and to trust that someone, somewhere, will one day tune in and understand. It happened just now. I was preparing to shut the array down, final transmission loop in place, backup battery dying. The signal I'd been broadcasting for weeks began to fade. my own voice fracturing, echoes inside echoes, and then, beneath it, a clarity I hadn't heard in years. A woman's voice, not automated, not pre-recorded, not mine. Calm, clear, she said. "Transmission received. You are not alone." That's all. But I heard breath behind it. Wait, not code, not a playback glitch, a real person, or something that sounds like one. And now I don't know what terrifies me more, that she's out there, or that she's here, somewhere beneath the crust or beyond the loop or within the silence I thought was mine alone. Not an echo, not a reply, but a voice speaking to me. And suddenly, for the first time in months, I realize I'm not broadcasting into nothing. This may be the last time I speak, or the first time someone's listening. Hard to say anymore. Time folds strange at the end. The voice still lingers in the static, faint, measured, and part of me believes I was never meant to survive, just to witness, to carry the fire far enough that it could be seen, heard, remembered. This is John, last known broadcaster on 1080 AM, still breathing, still decoding, and if this signal finds you, whoever you are, whatever you are, know this wasn't surrender, it was archive. This is the last broadcast, or maybe the first. Keep listening.